Oh, there you are. We see you and we're glad you're here. You've landed on the Daily Collective from the Ayn Rand Center, UK. Wait. Daily Collective? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an inside joke. Starting in the early 1950s, Ayn Rand met with a group of her students, her friends, which she jokingly called the Collective. They met informally, they socialized. In fact, they even read early copies of the manuscript of Atlas Shrugged. And that's what we're doing here now on this new program every day at 6 p.m. UK. It is the Daily Collective, and that is our chance to meet up with you, our philosophy posse, and some of the most interesting people in and around the world of objectivism. Here today, we've got two of those. We've got Kirk Wilcox. You know him from YouTube. He is a political satirist, does some really funny, insightful videos, and also Amanda Maxim, formerly of the Ayn Rand Center, or Ayn Rand Institute, I should say. She is also a podcaster with the Happiest Man Alive podcast and so many other things. So welcome to both of you. We're so happy that you're part of our collective.
Thank you.
And yeah, happy to be here again.
Good. Well, we've got some great topics here today. We're going to be talking about this idea of the libertarian alt-right pipeline. You know, the alt-right is huge, not just here in the States, but all around the world. I mean, this is the new face of the so-called conservative movement. Where do they start and how libertarianism, which Ayn Rand, of course, loathed, kind of plays into that. We're also going to talk about this emerging Nigel Farage banking scandal. Now, this is a UK story, but it has kind of national and global implications. I mean, just as people are being deplatformed from social media, from various networking sites, they're also being debanked. And Nigel Farage is a big part of that. And also a pretty frightening poll out, I believe this is Pew, about how no one actually is proud to be an American. You've heard the song, but in fact, the song does not ring true anymore. No one is proud to be an American. Why is that? We're going to get into all of that. And of course, your super chats. Chandler already in the super chat is saying, Kirkamaniacs, make some noise. Kirk, I know you've got many fans and followers. So we want to hear from you on the super chat. You're the ones keeping us alive, keeping the Ayn Rand Center able to be doing not only our in-person work all around the UK, but also all this programming. I mean, 2-3 hours worth of live programming a day inspired by Ayn Rand's objectivism. We're only able to do it, this international community, with your help, £2, £5 at a time. So thank you for supporting us on the super chat, and thank you again to our posse for being here today. So let's start, ladies and gents, if you guys are down with that, about this idea of libertarianism, which is still out there, it's seemingly growing, and the alt-right, which is really growing. I mean, so many of the big members of the alt-right now, at one point or not, have claimed to be libertarians, and it's not just Milos Yakinopoulos, it's so many others. Libertarianism is out there. The alt-right is a big part of it, and alt-right is the hottest thing in conservative politics right now. So, Kirk, we'll start with you, if you don't mind. You're the political satirist. And what do you make of this? I mean, Ayn Rand loathed libertarianism, but the libertarian ideas seem to be feeding the alt-right, which is exploding in popularity worldwide.
Well, I was about to jokingly ask, isn't Ayn Rand often lumped in with the so-called libertarians?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I read the article, and it's weird because the headline of the article kind of makes, from what I can tell, it implies that there's this like natural deterministic element within libertarians that makes them like drift toward the alt-right. But then if you read the article, it at times kind of mentions like, look, people of all political stripes and persuasions change their mind, and even some self-described libertarians like Bill Maher clearly never went this direction. So I don't know why they use that headline. Maybe it's clickbait, but I was thinking
so
about.
People don't know, this is an Atlantic article from a few years ago.
Was it Atlantic or Daily Beast?
Forgive me, you're exactly right. It was the Daily Beast from a few years ago, talking about how so many members of the alt-right profess to, at one point, have been identified as libertarians.
So I don't think, for as many issues as I have with the libertarian movement, I don't think it's fair to suggest that there's something part of them that naturally leads people to go to an ugly ideology that is the alt-right. But I do think there are some aspects of the libertarian movement that may kind of explain why some so-called libertarians eventually drift toward that direction. And I think two major aspects, one of which is the libertarian movement is broadly an anti-government movement. And I think naturally that's going to attract, let's be real, a lot of crackpots and conspiracy nuts and other wackos who may buy into some conspiracy craziness. And from what I can tell, the libertarian movement has always been pretty comfortable and tolerant of these kind of crackpot types. And I think if they're willing to embrace a lot of conspiracy nonsense and insanity, they probably might be open to whatever insanity the alt-right has to offer. And I think another aspect of the libertarian movement is that it's largely a political movement. And I think as a consequence, they fall short on some big philosophical questions. And from what I can tell, even a lot of the more intellectual thought leaders within the libertarian movement, when it comes to like bigger philosophical questions that can't really be answered by, well, let's just shrink the government or get rid of the government, they often default to tribalism. They fall back on tribalism or mysticism or subjectivism. And I've seen this kind of increase amongst the political right over the years, this attitude toward libertarians, where they kind of have this attitude like, yeah, they're just a bunch of economics nerds. And yeah, like corporate tax cuts, it's good for the economy, but do we really need corporate tax cuts? What good are corporate tax cuts when corporations like Disney and Google will just use that extra money to make woke cartoons or to hire people that will silence your YouTube videos? I think the culture war kind of really blew this wide open, this attitude of libertarians not really having answers on bigger philosophical questions. And I think a lot of people in that movement who may have been attracted to that movement at one time probably eventually got attracted by other ugly ideas.
That's a really interesting perspective. Amanda, what do you make of this? I mean, people kind of consume this libertarian ideology early on. Many of us who probably identify as objectivists kind of read this and dabbled with this. And then, as Kirk said, when they get involved in politics, seem to fall into the alt-right now. What's your perspective?
Okay, so my perspective is I read the article this morning and it's like the first I've heard of a lot of this. I guess I've heard of alt-right as a thing that you could be. And I know something about libertarianism, but then like for me to be able to make a connection between like, oh, there's some trend for libertarians to become this other thing that I don't know much about. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to comment very, it seems like, I don't know, very,
Sure.
I know more or less at all. But the one thing I did find compelling in the article that you sent was there's this Kevin, and he said that he gave the only thing that I thought was sort of plausible, that if you might be drawn to something like libertarianism because you're a bit out of the ordinary. Maybe you're kind of a contrarian, or you don't like the government, but you're willing to be different from other people and maybe even celebrate that, even above and beyond like the particulars of the ideas that you hold. And that could be a thing, that could be a very strong thing about a person, someone who's, I don't have to think like everybody else. I'm okay to be independent and to do my own thing. But it could be that, the ideas that they hold independently on their own are just like not good ideas. Or it could be that they want to rebel against sort of the structure and the everything in government, period. And then that could be something that would explain if there is a connection between those two things.
But Rand called libertarianism or libertarians hippies of the right. That was her term, I believe in the 60s or the early 1970s. What does that mean? Well, it seemed to be, this is my interpretation now, but an anything goes ideology, a really noxious big tent for which, Kirk, as I think as you alluded to, all these crackpots got together under this big term of, I don't know, maybe the non-aggression principle, but so much more. I mean, I remember seeing some video from a libertarian conference at some point a few years ago in which one of the leaders stripped naked on the stage. I don't know if you remember this one, and maybe that's unfair to kind of lump them all in, but it does seem as if libertarianism is what a lot of people who are broadly interested in free markets pick up on, at least politically. They kind of say, well, I would describe myself as a libertarian or libertarian minded. And then they find their way into what is the hottest thing in politics now, which is the alt-right. I mean, old style conservatives who would identify as being, for smaller government and more free markets, they have no place in American politics right now. And I think probably UK politics as well. It is these alt-right thought leaders, the Steve Bannons on down, who are not making the most noise, Kirk, but they're the ones that are setting the agenda for the politicians who have the reins of power.
And I want to make something clear. The alt-right is fundamentally, this wasn't a term coined by Richard Spencer. He created it as what he thought was an alternative version of right-wing politics. It is fundamentally a white nationalist movement. And I think, and I might be splitting hairs here, but from what I could tell, the alt-right kind of crashed after Charlottesville. And I think there was a split between Richard Spencer and Nick Fuentes, where I think they had a disagreement over religion. I think Richard Spencer was kind of indifferent over religion, whereas Nick Fuentes wanted to incorporate religion and theocracy into the ideology. And the Nick Fuentes, the Groypers, America First, is what they call themselves. I think they have kind of taken over. They have hijacked the alt-right movement ever since.
And I want to thank Apollo Zeus for your contribution. And as I said, you're the ones who are keeping this programming on the air. We are not funded by anything other than voluntary value for value mindset. And Kirk asks, how realistic is a pure objectivist society and culture, even far into the future? Would a rational libertarian society be more realistic? Is that a contradiction in terms of rational libertarian society? Amanda, you've tried this one on for size. You followed, a little bit about libertarianism, and you followed libertarians. Is there such a thing as a rational libertarian society? And is that the first step, at least towards introducing more people to objectivism?
I have no idea. I can say that there's a lot of libertarians that are really thoughtful people who have very interesting, rational things to say, who have clearly thought way more about politics and freedom, like atheism and that kind of thing than me. So I think there's really positive people in the libertarian movement. The question about like a pure objectivist society, I wonder what that really means. Like, what does it mean to have a pure society? Like, how long would it take to get there? I don't know. But the key is, like, you got to change people's minds. And if there's good things about the libertarian movement, and if those can catch on better, great, and head in a better direction, that'd be awesome. I don't know how long that would take or what it would require.
In the past, it seems like libertarianism in general, there was a sense of this was more individualistic. Talks in my book is around here somewhere, a new textbook of Americanism about there's two political choices in the world, individualism and collectivism. And for a while, individualism and libertarianism seem to be on the same political branch. But Kirk, the alt-right is, from what I can tell, you've studied this a lot more than I. You're thinking in politics, you follow it. The alt-right is not individualistic, is it?
No, absolutely not. They hold race as kind of primary. They hold that as kind of they reject individualism in favor of in favor of collectivism in the form of racism. And I think another thing that kind of united these two camps, I think you can kind of trace this back to around 2008, when I think the neoconservatives within the political right were largely discredited because of their response to 9/11. And I think people were searching for answers amongst the right. And I think two figureheads who really rose from that were people like Ron Paul and the Libertarians, who we're pretty isolationist in their foreign policy approach, and I think the alt-right kind of brought that same foreign policy perspective to the table, but from a more explicitly racist perspective. And I think, from what I can tell, that they are kind of united on the issue of foreign policy.
Bonnie Bertrand wants to know the specifics of this article. If I can share my screen, I can do it for our industrious producer out there. This is an article going back, as Kirk mentioned, from the Daily Beast from 2017, the insidious libertarian to alt-right pipeline. Matt Lewis was the columnist on that. But if you talk to a lot of these alt-right members, and Kirk, you seem to kind of make that, you describe it as an anti-white or a white supremacist type of a mentality out there. But alt-right is huge in the States now, and people on the alt-right big picture, would they identify as being white supremacists? I mean, has it been cleaned up for public consumption?
I mean, they probably wouldn't, but I think they get influenced in ways, I think, especially on the whole immigration debates. They argue for immigration controls, including on, get ready, legal immigration. A lot of times they say, a lot of people on the right will say, we're not opposed to immigration, we're just opposed to illegal immigration. But when you pay attention, when you watch a lot of these more race-based commentators, they are explicit that they want restrictions on legal immigration because they think allowing in non-white, especially non-white immigrants, is going to undermine the demographics of America, and it's going to fundamentally change America, which is just bonkers, by the way.
Well, there is that, Amanda, there's this America First slogan.
Which, by the way, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar, I think, have both spoken at some of these America First conferences. MTG, the #1 rap sensation of the alt-right movement. I mean, Amanda, what do you even make of this idea of America First? Because that's big in the alt-right, and libertarianism seems to embrace it.
I don't know. Shouldn't it be like America only? I mean, I don't know. What does that mean first? So we do some stuff for us and then for everyone else next, or I don't even know what that means, really.
Should be freedom first. And a lot of the Groyper types, they think freedom is a joke. Even the Second Amendment, they think, why are conservatives obsessed with the Second Amendment of the Constitution? We should be focusing on demographics and God and all of that gobbledygook.
Yeah, it does seem like, Rand talked and wrote about libertarianism. And Peter Schwartz has a wonderful article originally published. Thank you, Bonnie, for your contribution.
Hi, Bonnie.
Thank you, adherent of Lady Columbia, for your contribution as well. I mean, she says she was online at the time trying to figure things out. The alt-right died by 2019. The new wave that came after are neo-reactionaries and post-liberals, both mostly removing racial elements, but now only family-minded. There's all these kind of branches of ideology. They're all collectivist, and none of them, to me, seem to be influenced at all by Rand. Rand's influence seems to be just completely absent, and by that I mean individualism, radical and rational individualism. That's nowhere to be found in today's so-called right wing or alt-right wing as well, despite our efforts.
Yeah, and I think another way that the more Groyper types, because like I mentioned earlier, they want to incorporate.
You keep saying this, Groyper. I don't mean to interrupt, but my sense is, Amanda, do you even know what Groyper is? Sounds like Groper, but it's not.
I don't know what that is. I don't. There's a couple of things in there, like neo somethings and something else. I've never heard of that. Alt-right, is that a political? It's a political party, or is it a loosely affiliated group? I don't know.
I think it's just what the America First dorks started calling themselves. I don't really know what it means. They often have those Pepe the Frog cartoons in their social media avatars and memes and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, Groyper is part of what I've understood to be this the Nick Fuentes world, they're underneath the surface, but they're influencing, from what I can tell, modern right-wing politics right now. I mean, the Lauren Boeberts, the Paul Gozers, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, they're a big part of the alt-right circle. And I do think, from what I can tell, libertarianism feeds into that. I mean, libertarianism.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed is they started showing up to like Turning Point USA events and Daily Wire events and really challenging these conservative speakers on issues of like race and why are we giving all this money to Israel and this and that, and should we really be stapling green cards to diplomas? This is one issue they challenged Charlie Kirk on, and I think because they brought religion and theocracy to the table, from what I can tell, a lot of these more mainstream conservative commentators, especially, you mentioned Lauren Boebert about how she's mentioned, separation of church and state, that was just written in some letters. And even Charlie Kirk has since said like, oh yeah, who cares about separation of church and state? We need church and state more mingled and whatnot. I think a lot of the more mainstream conservative commentators have been more comfortable espousing theocratic ideas ever since.
Let's think Robert Nasser, who's on our channel. He says, and he's for his contribution, he says, America first. If they said nation first or state first, and some of them do, the real meaning would be obvious as fuck, as he says, or as hell. I mean, there is that nationalistic element to many in the libertarian movement, and certainly many on the so-called alt-right. And some of them, terribly enough, cite Ayn Rand as an influence as well. Now, you're on the Daily Collective from the Ayn Rand Center UK. It's just part of the massive expansion of programming that we're able to bring you because of your contributions. $5 at a time, $10 at a time, become that monthly subscriber. And we're all students of objectivism. We're trying to apply Ms. Rand's ideas to some of the issues of the day. This issue is one of them, the so-called alt-right. But with your guys' permission, should we kind of chasse over to the Nigel Farage banking story?
Yeah, sure. Another thing I know little about. I would like to say, just from listening to you talk about what's happening with politics, and you're saying that there's lots of little different fractured groups showing up saying, no, family is important to me, and like we need a different group, and like branching off from libertarianism, which is already like the only alternative really to like the two major parties. It sounds like there's a lot of change going on, and a lot of people that are generally like dissatisfied with what like the options available to them, and they're saying like, look, there's things that are important to me that are not being addressed. And just to say, like in that kind of change, there's always opportunity. So if we can figure out a way to say, to help people who are the more positive people who are really honestly searching for an ideology that makes sense and that is good. If there's a lot of turmoil and upheaval and people like finally considering, maybe I'm not a Democrat after all, or a Republican or a Libertarian, that there is this other alternative. And hey, come on over, the water's great.
Yeah, I mean, I know what here at the Ayn Rand Center UK, we're trying to offer is some type of alternative to collectivism, which is the so-called uniparty. Carol Roth, who was on our channel a couple of days ago, talked about that, the libertarians, or the right wing, the left wing, all the so-called uniparty right now. And, they all seemingly want to cancel someone. And Nigel Farage seems to be the latest. I mean, this was kind of a big story, still is a big story out of the UK. I mean, Nigel Farage, of those of you who don't know, he's a big British politician or former politician, and he led that Brexit movement, basically to try to get the UK out of the EU, which was ultimately successful. And basically what happened is that, ladies and gents, interrupt me if I'm wrong here, but basically a British bank canceled Nigel Farage's accounts. He had an account at a British bank called Coutts, maybe I'm mispronouncing, Coutts, kind of a very hoity, very kind of hip and high-end British private bank. He had his accounts canceled. And at first they said, well, he doesn't meet the criteria anymore. He did a little digging and came out that no, this was because of his political perspectives. There was a briefing presented to the bank's reputational risk committee. It said that Farage is considered by many, and this is from the Politico article, to be a disingenuous grifter. And it wasn't just from this bank, which was owned by NatWest, but Nigel Farage says it's 10 plus banks now basically have canceled him and canceled his ability to even open up an account. So we know.
Did they give him the money back?
Yeah, they don't.
So he's like got it in suitcases under his bed right now, or what?
Well, I think they don't take his money, but they don't allow him to transact business. And if you can't open an account with really any major bank, you're kind of in a pickle, as they say.
Well, I think a bigger part of the scandal that I found interesting. So I guess the CEO reportedly, according to CNBC, is quitting because I guess part of this was that she spilled some beans that she wasn't supposed to spill. I guess she thought it was like publicly known information and it wasn't. So it sounds like she may have had a breach of ethics or contract with one of her clients. And so now she's stepping down. But when I was reading into this, I was like, wait a minute. So this is NatWest, which is owned by Couts. And I guess this bank is 39% owned by the taxpayers in the United Kingdom. And she spilled.
Just remember, Couts is owned by NatWest, which is a major British bank. Couts is the smaller entity owned by NatWest, which is the major entity, which, as you said, which is thanks to a rescue more than a decade ago, is still partially owned by the UK government.
Yeah, 39%. And she leaked this information to the BBC, which is a state-owned media company. And I'm over here reading this like, what's wrong with the United Kingdom with all this socialist nonsense, like 40% ownership of banks and ownership of media companies, and they're conspiring against an opposition politician. Like the UK has a lot of messes to clean up, it sounds like.
Yeah, Amanda, you read a little bit about this. I know, kind of. What do you know about Nigel Farage? Maybe you're not a fan of his. I've been on with him on Fox and Fox Business a bit here and there, but should someone have their bank accounts canceled just because they have kind of an unappetizing or unappealing political view?
Oh man, that's a hard one. I guess that's a question that if I owned a bank, that'd be the kind of question I guess that I would be asking myself, right? If I'm allowing someone to transact at my business, I'm helping them in some way, and maybe there's someone that I really don't want to help, and like I can assume that's something that could happen, or there would be some decision I would make that would say, nope, this guy, I don't want to support him, and it's my bank, and so I say, no, sorry, take your money elsewhere. So that seems like a reasonable thing to do or to be able to do. Now, if it's for bad reasons, then yeah,
for a second. It's not like, as I understand it, Nigel Farage was involved with something like Epstein, with child trafficking or drugs or something like that. I mean, this document says that he's friendly with President Trump. He's friendly with Novak Dvorak, the tennis star. He's got some unconventional views on COVID vaccine and more controversial views. But, why would a bank drop him? I mean, he is a millionaire. And is that really right? That just because you maybe have some more controversial views, like, I don't know, objectivism, you shouldn't be able to open a bank account?
Yeah.
So what we're thinking about here is not whether or not the government should mandate banks serve everyone, but whether or not, like, ethically, a bank should give someone the boot. From Nigel Farage, for what I can tell, he's pretty conventional. He's not like really that fringe, but like then there is the perspective, like if you're a bank and say this activist group called Just Stop Oil, which is involved in a bunch of shenanigans, if we were in a free market, which I don't think the UK is when it comes to banking, if there was a free market and Just Stop Oil wanted to bank with you, I could understand why a bank would be like, I don't want to support this. One, we have a lot of investments in fossil fuels, but your guys' antics are way out of control. We don't want to support this. But from what I can tell, Nigel Farage is nowhere near that level of craziness.
Yeah, I mean, Christopher Smith, who's a great super chatter very frequently, he says, basically they're punishing clients for political views. That's not banking. It's not professional. It's pretty terrifying. I mean, yeah, I mean, this is kind of went on behind the scenes. This was something at first, they didn't give him an explanation of why his accounts had been closed. Then it was reported, at least Kirk, as you said, the BBC, which is also an entity of the British government, said that, maybe he doesn't meet the financial criteria. But Nigel Farage, to his credit, kind of, pushed a little bit further and got some of these documents, which were published in the Daily Mail, that said, some of it was his support for Trump, his defense of sexual harassment allegations that had been made against Trump. This document said that, it was distasteful. It appeared to be out of touch with a wider society. Well, that might be true, but why would one have his or her bank accounts canceled because of that? I mean, isn't that, and I'm against the cancel culture nature of cancel culture. Amanda, to your point, I feel like a business should be able to hold whoever it wants, but isn't it a little frightening when someone like Nigel Farage has his bank accounts canceled just because he's got a little bit of an unorthodox political perspective?
Totally. And has this caused other people to pull out of that particular bank? Because I'm curious about, has there been other fallout from that? Because if I had money in the bank, like, oh man, I'm going to think twice about that, given I've got some political views that are probably unappetizing. Maybe I should take my money elsewhere and support someone who's, I don't know, more on my side.
I think I read somewhere that
that relationship goes both ways.
I think I read somewhere that the bank lost something like 3% market value. And then, going back to the point that it's 39% state owned, when the government is this invested in a bank and then it does something that hurts its value. Now you're talking about potentially hurting the so-called taxpayers and society as a whole, which is even more reason. I think this opens up a broader issue. You need to defang. You need to get the government the hell out of banking, especially in the United Kingdom, because it just muddies waters and makes a lot of these, it makes it difficult for banks to make various decisions without it becoming too politicized.
It makes everybody into a victim. It's like, okay, so how, I'm not a citizen of the UK, but say I was, okay, well, they canceled this guy's account and that affects me. And so now I have some sort of a stake in this. Why, am I a victim here? Is he a victim? Are we all victims? It makes it really complex.
Well, here in the U.S., as I recall, a lot of the members, kind of getting back to our previous topic of the alt-right, Kirk, you follow this. They had a lot of their bank accounts and stuff pulled, their PayPal accounts and stuff pulled, or their YouTube accounts and stuff pulled once kind of their political awareness became mainstream. Was that fair at the time? And the fact that their banking relationships were pulled, and it does seem to kind of trickle down to that idea of like, well, is a bank account a right? Does everyone have a so-called right to have a bank account, even if their political views are noxious to some? Or is this just ESG gone even more?
Wasn't this also a big deal in Canada during the trucker protests? Wasn't Trudeau and the Canadian government freezing assets so that the protesters couldn't get funding? And it's like, okay, in a free market, again, I don't think Canada clearly doesn't have a free market in banking, but if a private bank wants to make that decision, maybe it's not always a good decision for banks to be political, even in a free market, but for the state to do it is just insane. And again, this bank is 39% owned. But going back to your question, whether or not people have some sort of inalienable right to a bank account. It's funny. I was just watching a video that the Wall Street Journal put up last night about the history of the Federal Reserve. It's 10 minutes long. And I remember at one point they said the desire for a Federal Reserve in the United States really picked up steam after the 1907 crash, when JP Morgan came to the rescue and solved the banking crisis. And the lesson politicians took at the time was, do we really want a private citizen to have this much control and sway over the banking system? And that's how we got a Federal Reserve. And I think it brings it back to this notion that ultimately this isn't about economics. It's more about stuff like fairness and this misconception of rights and whatnot. So,
that's a great point. This is being met with calls in the UK for even more regulation of the banking sector. To your point, Kirk, even among some in the the right wing. It's led to some resignations from NatWest. There was an interesting post, I can say, from someone on Harry Binswanger list about this issue as well. He called for more deregulation of the banking sector, of which there is very little in the UK, or even kind of call for it in the UK right now. So we're going in the wrong direction once again, except for those of us here at the Ayn Rand Center UK who know that it's Kirk, as you said. I mean, this isn't really a private entity. Even banks that aren't owned by the government or partially owned by the government, I mean, they're trying to work within this mixed economy, right? Kind of they're free market, but there's no less than 3 or 4 banking regulators in the UK alone. So how free of a market really is that?
Yeah, I think it's been said before, because the government is so involved in banking, and I imagine in the UK, when the government is, propping up a lot of these banks and getting involved, it really makes it difficult for competitors to enter the market, to where this would be much less of an issue of people finding banks that will serve their needs.
This is what an adherent lady of Columbia, thank you for your $5 contribution. She says, this is censorship by proxy that Rand spoke of with things like broadcasters. Worse, now we have enemy activists in these businesses trying to warp them. In fact, if you look at this Coutts Bank website, I mean, they're all about the ESG. They all very politically correct, very investing in, green everything, green energy. So, I mean, that's become mainstream right now. And people with, political views or that are a little outside the norm, they're seen as a reputational risk for businesses big and small.
And yeah, I want to, who was the last comment from, sorry if I forget your name, but Rand has a really good essay in Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, where she kind of talks about this property status over the airwaves, where she talks about like the history of the FCC and how they got involved with issuing broadcast license and how that gave government and bureaucrats control over what could be said and not said over broadcast radio and television.
Should we move to this final story about patriotism a bit in the U.S.?
Sure.
Amanda, I hope you saw this one. I did. Yeah. There was a survey out that patriotism is, at least, in terms of people who are proud to be an American, is plummeting. Only 18% of young people say that they're extremely proud to be an American, and only 39% of U.S. adults. Now, I know we are the Ayn Rand Center UK, but Americanism has always stood for, by and large, individualism, capitalism, freedom. And why is it now that so few people, even in the U.S., want to be associated and thought of as being an American? Why are they, Amanda, so loath to be? Why are they not proud of being an American?
I don't know. I find that it's sad. It's too bad. Or maybe it's a really good thing that if you think being American now represents something that's not what you believe in anymore, like, I don't know, some collectivist thing that's not what America should be. So I find it both like sad, and also maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's people are, I'm not proud of where we are now, so maybe we can make some change that's better. Now, I don't know what it means to people to be an American. When I looked at the article that you sent, it had a graph of like how people, like the proudness level of people over time. Yeah, and I saw that there was a little hump in there. Like, I think that's due to like 9/11, right? Where people were like suddenly like, no, I am proud to be an American. I thought that was kind of interesting. It's like, maybe there's something that pushes on you from the outside that really makes you think about who is it that we are as a nation, and what does it mean to be an American? So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Here's the graphic from the Daily Mail. Kirk, I think you're looking at what Amanda's referencing. I mean, there was kind of a bump in the early part of the 2000s after 9/11, it seems, but that percentage of people who are proud or extremely proud to be an American has fallen to, an all-time low, and it's been on the decline for decades. But like, it's like, if they're not proud to be an American, are you, where would you rather be from? I mean, Dubai, Sweden, and why is it cool, or why would you be proud to be from, I don't know, the UK more than necessarily from America?
Sounds like a lot of people need to read a certain book. It's called A New Textbook of Americanism, where it might give them a proper sense of what it means to be an American and what America is all about. And I wonder how much of this is just because of a lot of what is often called doomerism, for lack of better terms. And you see this across the political spectrum, where people focus on hyper focus on negatives and negative trends, and they tend to overlook and ignore the positives. And yeah, there are a lot of problems in America, a lot of troubling trends that we should think about, but I think we also have to appreciate a lot of the more positive trends and a lot of the good things that are happening in America and in the world right now.
Robert, thank you for your contribution. Robert says, sadly, patriotism is now seen by half the country as a dog whistle for nationalism and even racism. For this, I blame both the left and the right. Well, Amanda, I guess it doesn't help much that Donald Trump's intro music is very frequently, if not YMCA, it's I'm proud to be an American.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, you're proud to be an American, I suppose, even though you're not probably too happy with the way the country is headed politically now. Why? Why?
Why? Because I love so much about what it means to be an American and what that means to me. It means I have an unprecedented amount of freedom, especially in the history of mankind and or the history of politics. I don't know where else I would really want to be, and that doesn't mean that I don't long for more and I don't want to make things better, but I really do appreciate the freedoms that I have and the idea that they're tied to this specific place. That's cool. But I think also if there was some other country that was way more awesome, then maybe I'd be proud to be in that country too. So it's a bit tied to the geography here, but it's also like the ideas that are lived out here in action, the way people are to each other. That just like the general culture of independence. That's great.
Well, there is a political angle to this as well. I mean, to Robert's point, 60%, Kirk, of Republicans said they were proud to be American, and only 29% of Democrats. So, I would never side with any political party in the U.S. now, but more, people on the so-called right seem to be more enamored with Americanism, even if their understanding of what Americanism isn't right at all. Maybe, Amanda, this is your point as well. Even people who say that they're proud to be American, do they even know what those real ideals are about?
Yeah. What does that mean to them?
Yeah. I mean, and it, Kirk, to your point, is it individualism? Is it capitalism? The people who say that that they are proud to be an American, do they even know what that is? The irony is that to both of you said, it's like when someone gets in trouble overseas or so, like Brittany Griner or anything like that, so many people who like put down America, it's like once they've got an issue, first thing they claim is, well, I'm an American, what about my freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of the press, this and that. So it's like, we love to shit on America up until we don't have the freedoms that America at its best protects.
Well, yeah, and especially now that like Oppenheimer has come out, and I haven't seen the movie yet, but I've seen a lot of debates, really break out on Twitter over whether or not America and the Allies were really the good guys because, World War II just led to more American imperialism, and that had a lot of baggage, and was it right for the United States to kill so many civilians with the dropping of the atomic bombs? And yeah, it's very unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, Christopher reminds us that, you'll never hear him shitting on America. We'll hold these truths to be self-evident: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But it's like, even that is seen a little bit too indulgent now, right? Because on the right, it's like, your happiness, you should be pursuing America's happiness, the greater good for the country. And then, of course, on the so-called left now, I mean, your happiness doesn't mean anything. You should be sacrificing for, I don't know, teachers or the environment or anything but yourself. So there is no kind of a fervor for American individualism, as I know objectivism, I believe, would hold it, and think the members of this panel would hold it as well. There's just no political interest in that right now on the spectrum, which is frustrating as hell, and which is why we're here Monday through Friday with all of these programs with stars like Amanda Maxim and Kirk Wilcox from his eponymous YouTube channel. We're here trying to promote these ideas in person in events all over the UK and every day on this channel with stars like Mark Pellegrino, Kirk, Amanda, Harry Binswanger, so many others. I mean, we're here to bring you James Valiant, and we're here to bring you our perspectives and try to apply Ayn Rand's thinking to the world at large. And we're only able to do it with your support. So thank you for being a member. Thank you for supporting us on the YouTube chat. We need you to be part of our conversation, part of our philosophy posse, because we're here day after day after day with this programming. So we'll send it around the horn for any last comments on any of the issues that we talked about today. Amanda, we'll start with you in terms of what say you about our program and about all these topics in the news.
I'm really excited that I read some news for the first time in a really long time. I appreciate that. And I appreciate being here with you two, that I get this, and it's an interesting way for me to consume the news. So for me, I guess ARCUK, if I listen to this show when I wasn't on, that would be a good reason to do it, is that I could get some, like a dose of what's going on in the world that I wouldn't otherwise get. So I appreciate that. Also, read Atlas Shrugged.
I want to interrupt for 1 second. Lady, adherent of Lady Columbia, who is a YouTube member, and that's a great way to support us. Like if you can't become a member on the website, YouTube membership, I think is £5 a month. It's really not that much. You get access to all these VIP invites with James Valiant, with Harry Binswanger, with Kirk, and so many others. So, take this opportunity. It's like really not that much, and you help us out, keep this programming on the air Monday through Friday. Lady Columbia says, I wonder if this is all relating to people feeling socially isolated. They can't connect with people. She knows that in terms of modern dating, it's a nightmare. Kirk, what do you make of that?
It's funny because, I think a lot of this might be people just being, again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of doomerism, a lot of people who are just too online and doom scrolling and just, reading headlines. And let's be real, I hate to always say, oh, the media this, the media that, but they are often very negative. But often when you go outside, when you touch grass, when you talk to other people, I think things are a lot better reflected out there when you actually interact with people than when people are online at each other's throats and negative and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that's the old saying, right? If it bleeds, it leads. The news is part of what I love about objectivism is that if you learn anything about it, Amanda, you said it, read Atlas Shrugged. I mean, objectivism is an unbelievably, in my opinion, optimistic philosophy. I mean, it's all about maximizing, enjoying, making the most of your values, your time on earth. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be optimistic about the culture, despite how frustrating and difficult it is. I mean, there's so much to enjoy about the world today. We live in the best time in the history of mankind. I mean, all the technology at our fingertips allows us to connect. So, and allows us to connect with people like adherent of Lady Columbia and so many others.
Yeah, so that's a better last word for me, is that, go love the things around you, about America that you love, about the UK that you love, because just by the very fact of you doing that, you're making the world better. By loving those things, encouraging people that you think are good people, buying things that you are going to enjoy, and just your attitude of being positive, happy to be alive and loving life. That does make the world a better place. Certainly makes your life a better. And
celebrating your freedom. I mean, people aren't proud to be American. Well, think about life for even a moment in a place where you aren't as free. North Korea comes to mind. I mean, my sense is having, heard that young lady who spoke at OCON, her name's escaping me for a moment here.
Naomi Park, right,
who's the escapee from North Korea. I mean, she's pretty proud to be an American, and we are as well. So thank you to our super chatters. Kurt Robert, for the final contribution, says he's wrapping it up with love. Proud to be part of the ARCUK. We're proud to have him. Proud to have our panel here as well. So keep it tuned here. Kirk, thank you. Any final words?
To the extent, maybe brush up on the Declaration of Independence and, re-recognize what America is all about and try to claim America on that front, that what life is all about, what America is all about is living and pursuing happiness.
Right. It's put the me in Americanism. I'll throw in a plug for my book as well as there. So thanks for being part of what we do here Monday through Friday. We're back tomorrow with another Ayn Rand Center UK, both the Daily Objective and the Daily Collective. Thank you for hanging out with us and being part of what we do. For Amanda Maxim and Kirk Wilcox, Jonathan Honig, we'll see you tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective Collective. It's all right here with the Ayn Rand Center UK. best premises, and be well.